Michael Barrett just signed with the Baltimore Ravens. And this is a name you should just scroll past. There's something buried in his background that changes how you should look at this whole move. And once you hear it, you'll understand why this signing is a much bigger deal than it looks on the surface. Here's the question you need answered right now. Why would Baltimore go after this particular linebacker at this exact moment, out of every free agent available? The answer connects directly to the man building this defense from the ground up, and it's about to change how you see this entire roster decision. Let's get straight into who Michael Barrett is, because this name deserves real attention. According to ESPN's Jamison Hensley, Baltimore signed a former Michigan linebacker this week, adding him to a defense that's still being built around its new coordinator. On paper, that might look like just another roster transaction, the kind of move that happens quietly every week during camp. But this one isn't quiet once you dig into the background. Barrett played linebacker at Michigan during the program's national championship run in 2023. That's not a random college stop. That's one of the most talked about defenses in the sport over the last several years, built by a staff that knew what it was doing at every level. And the man running that defense was Jesse Minter. Barrett played under him directly, learning the system, executing the calls, competing at the highest level college football has to offer during a title-winning season. That's the same coach who now runs Baltimore's defense, which means the signing carries weight that goes well beyond a typical camp body. That's the part one keep coming back to. You don't find many players walking into a new locker room already speaking the defensive language their coordinator wants to install. Barrett has that built in, and that's why this move deserves more attention than it's getting right now. So, why does that Michigan connection actually matter on the field? Think about what a new coordinator faces during a compressed training camp. Minter has to install checks, calls, coverages, and terminology fast, and every player who needs extra time to catch up slows that whole process down a little. Barrett skips that entire learning curve. He already ran Minter's system at Michigan, which means he isn't hearing these concepts for the first time. He's relearning a language he already speaks, and that's a massive head start compared to a rookie or a free agent coming from a completely different scheme. I'll be honest, this is the kind of signing that gets overlooked by a lot of people scrolling through roster transactions. It doesn't come with a big contract number or a flashy college resume full of All-American honors. But familiarity with a coordinator system is worth more in August than most fans realize, especially for a defense still finding its identity under new leadership. And that's why I think Barrett is worth tracking closely from here. A player who already trusts the scheme and already understands what Minter wants from his linebackers has a real path to standing out during the rest of camp, even without the name recognition some other additions carry. Now here's the part that adds even more context to this move. Baltimore made the signing in a corresponding transaction after placing center Danny Pinter on injured reserve with season-ending torn patella tendon. That injury opened up a roster spot, and instead of just filling it with any available body, Baltimore chose Barrett specifically. That decision tells you something. Baltimore didn't need to add a linebacker with this particular background. There were plenty of other options available on the open market during camp. Choosing a player with a direct tie to Minter's system at this specific moment shows real intention behind the move rather than just filling a number on the roster. I think that's the detail Ravens fans should really lock onto here. This wasn't a desperate reaction. The bad news on the offensive line. This was a targeted decision to bring in a player who fits what the new coordinator is building, using an open roster spot as the opportunity to do it. So while the timing came from an unfortunate injury, the choice itself says a lot about how Baltimore's front office is thinking. They're not just managing headcount. They're using every available spot to add pieces that fit Minter's vision. And Barrett is a clear example of that approach in action. Let's talk about what this could mean for Barrett's path forward in Baltimore. Making an NFL roster as a linebacker isn't easy, especially with training camp battles happening at nearly every position. But Barrett has something a lot of hopefuls walking into a new building don't have, and that's a real relationship with the man calling the defensive shots. That matters for reps, for trust, and for how quickly a coaching staff is willing to give a player a real look. Coordinators tend to lean toward players who already understand the little details of a scheme, the checks that don't show up on a stat sheet, the communication that makes a defense function as one unit instead of 11 guys guessing. I'm not saying Barrett is guaranteed anything here. Training camp is full of names that generate buzz early and then quietly disappear by final cuts. But this is a player with a genuine built-in advantage, and that's worth something real when a staff is deciding who earns a shot on special teams or in a rotational role. Given everything working in his favor, I think Barrett has a legitimate chance to carve out a real role in this defense, not just survive as camp filler. And that's the kind of storyline worth following as practices continue and preseason games start sorting out the roster. Stepping back, this signing says something bigger about how Baltimore's defense is being built under Minter. It's one thing to hire a respected coordinator and let him install a new system from scratch with the players already on the roster. It's another thing to start adding players who already live that same system at a championship level. That's a different approach to roster building, and it's one worth watching as camp continues. If Baltimore keeps targeting players with direct ties to Minter's coaching tree, that tells you the front office is thinking about scheme fit in a specific, deliberate way, not just filling out a depth chart with available talent. For a defense still finding its footing under new leadership, having a player who already trusts the system and already understands what's being asked of him could pay off in ways that don't show up right away, but matter once the games start counting. Barrett brings a kind of familiarity to a linebacker room still adjusting to a new voice calling the shots. And that's why, out of everything that happened around Baltimore this week, this signing is the one I keep coming back to. It's not the loudest headline, but it might end up being one of the more meaningful additions once the season gets underway. This is a signing that deserves more attention than a typical camp transaction usually gets. Michael Barrett isn't just a name filling a roster spot. He's a player who already lived Jesse Minter's defensive system at the highest level of college football, and that kind of familiarity doesn't come around often in late August. What matters most here is what this move says about Baltimore's approach under its new coordinator. Targeting a player with his background, using an open roster spot to bring him in specifically, shows a level of intention that goes beyond just managing numbers. If Barrett earns real reps and pushes for a role in this linebacker room, this could end up being one of the more underrated additions of the entire offseason. I'm curious to see how far Barrett actually goes with this opportunity. Do you think his connection to Minter gives him a real shot at making this roster, or is the linebacker room already too crowded for him to break through? Let me know what you think in the comments.
And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out, and I'll see you in the next video.